So, Critical Role is catching some flack right now because they are, I believe, in the process of starting a new season. And rather than use their brand new, freshly minted, newly released system Daggerheart,
Hmm.
they're back to the old D&D well.
Yeah, and it's interesting because that's something I really wasn't expecting it, and maybe I was just being naive about it but then I thought about this. Like, remember that we're still seeing the dominoes falling from 2023 with the OGL controversy, and like everybody's tired of hearing us talk about that because we bring it up all the damn time. But it has such a long tail of effect on everything. Like, without that, we wouldn't have Tales of the Valiant, we wouldn't have Daggerheart, because as we've talked about many times, all those things popped up as reactions to Wizards of the Coast screwing with the OGL. And
Right.
there was that, maybe like month, 2 months, month and a half. I can't really remember off the top of my head because it's been a while, where everything was kind of in limbo as to what was going to happen. Were we going to be stuck with this restrictive OGL? Were they going to go back to the old one? And they ended up going sort of a third option, which nobody really expected, putting it into Creative Commons, and they were kind of backed into a corner to do something like that. But in that period, we saw things like Critical Role talking about, oh, well, we're going to make our own system, Daggerheart. We had Tales of the Valiant come up. There were like several others that I can't remember because I've said a number of times, it's like there's going to be a lot of also rans that come out of that situation, right? But then everybody got juked because Wizards put it in Creative Commons, and then like we said at the time, and like lots of other people said, it's like, well, what's the point of these others now? Because if you enjoy 5e and you're on the 5e ecosystem and you've got all your third-party 5e content, why switch to anything? Like, there's literally no reason for it now because these rules are in Creative Commons and they can never change them, make you do whatever you want. But a lot of people, including Critical Role, had gone a little bit too far down that road. And I will say that Matt Mercer and Critical Role, they would have done this anyway. This was just like, it was inevitable that, because as big as Critical Role is, they would have created their own system as a mainstream eventually.
At the
But
very least, a world guide book sort of situation.
yeah, and so if anything, this just sort of sped things along. But anyway, so a couple months ago, Daggerheart comes out, and we've done a lot of content on Daggerheart since it came out. I know Inver is super hype on it. She actually convinced me to get the Daggerheart core rules, which are sitting in the other room right now, and I haven't really had a chance to dig into it yet. But I'm very excited about the stuff that I've read. It's a really interesting system. So we all knew that Matt Mercer was stepping down as GM from the fourth season of Critical Role, right? And Brendan Lee Mulligan was coming in there. And it's like their setup is absurd. I'll just say that, like, doing a 13 player, like, multi-table West Marches campaign, it's getting way too complex. I think it's gone beyond at this point. But, the real swerve there is like, oh yeah, no, they're sticking with 5e. They're sticking with 5e. And I was really confused. Like, there's a lot of solid sort of like business reason for it, I guess. And in the how creator friendly is their gaming license episode we had a couple weeks back, on the video of that, there was a lot of activity in the YouTube comments of folks talking about this. It started off somebody saying, hey, it's a shame that they're still using D&D for campaign 4. I'd love to see them break away from the toxicity of WotC completely. And like, it's a gaming system. I think it's kind of weird sometimes when people start talking about it being toxic. It's a tool. Like, you can bring whatever you want to it, kind of. And then I was sort of managing our comment responses on it. And I said, well, it's a curious choice. If I were launching a new TTRPG system and had the most well-known actual play podcast, I would definitely be using one as a vehicle for the other. And
Right.
yeah, and then I say, maybe switching GMs was enough of a change for them for now. But it just, there's both sides of the argument. The first is what I just said, which is it doesn't make a lot of sense if you have the biggest platform for non-WotC D&D content that's being created, right? You've brought all these people in the hobby, and so many of them are sort of disaffected with WotC and how they've managed Dungeons & Dragons and how they sort of have the corner on the tabletop hobby. there is nobody better placed than them to really push Daggerheart to become the strongest number 2 we've ever seen, more so than Pathfinder. And maybe that's why they didn't do it. Maybe they don't want to upset WotC, because even though Hasbro doesn't pay them to use D&D, like, they have such a good working relationship, it's almost symbiotic. So I wonder if they just didn't want to sour the milk.
There's a lot to be said for, as you have sometimes pointed out, we are a fairly niche hobby. Like, we are admittedly much larger than we were 30 years ago, but we're still kind of niche. And the groups that are creating content for TTRPGs are relatively few. And those relative few tend to want to stay on good terms with one another, because you never know when you're going to need that leg up later. I think there's a lot to be said for Critical Role understanding the sort of political relationships that they're interacting with. I get what the commenter was talking about, where it's like, if WotC is deemed as kind of a toxic influence, then running games inside D&D, when you're as big as, something like Critical Role, it kind of feels like you're advertising for this system that a lot of people have been like, God, I really wish you wouldn't. Which, I don't know. To me, that still feels like a personal decision. Don't get me wrong, WotC's done plenty to upset most of us at some point or another. But I don't know that I'm even at the point where it's like, man, we got to get away from this as a system. Like, there's just too much bad blood. It's leaving a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. Like, I'm not using any of those metaphors at this point. So from where I sit, it makes perfect sense from a political capital standpoint to be like, this is a system that we've done a lot of work with already. They might continue to sponsor us if we keep using their system. And honestly, as big as their production crew is, I know they're making money, but I have to imagine that they're not all making a ton of money. Though part of that is having a 13-person table. Come on.
Yeah. Well, one of the other comments that was responding to what I had said, it's somebody named @eSleep. It says, I have a feeling it has a lot to do with the fact that they have a massive number of players, 13 in 3 rotating groups, who are already familiar with D&D. 2, a guest DM who is extremely familiar and skilled with D&D. If they wanted to have both those things, it would be much more difficult to make all those people intimately learn this brand new system in a short amount of time. And in fact, while they were planning the campaign, Daggerheart may have not been fully released yet. Brennan Lee Mulligan's also continuing with Dimension 20 while running Critical Role 4. So having him switch between systems would probably also make it even more difficult for him and introduce a whole new set of potential issues. So I think there's some points there. I think Daggerheart still essentially being in playtest when they were doing all the pre-production on this, valid point. However, they control their production schedule.
True, but similar to how we don't want to miss a release, because if we miss a release, that impacts download numbers and things like that. I imagine they don't want to have too much of a delay between when their previous season ended and when their next season begins.
The timing is just really curious, because if they control both those things, the new system and the vehicle that they could put it on, like, sync those things up. Like, you can talk about all the really good political and business reasons for why this was smart. And like, there was a Wargamer story from Molly Russell where that really sort of breaks down how hysterical the reaction to this is. And to be clear, I'm not being hysterical about it. I'm looking at it just kind of from my own perspective. But she says, like, this is, in very blunt terms, a little dramatic. Only the Critical Role teams know their true reasons for playing D&D. But there's some clear evidence this was a sensible business decision rather than a personal slight against Daggerheart. At no point have I thought that it was a personal slight against Daggerheart. No. I just don't think it's a good business decision long term. It may be a short term good decision, but I don't think it's a long term decision. A long term good decision, because, like, delay the release of Daggerheart to coincide with when you're ready to roll it out on Critical Role. Now, maybe they didn't do that because we're already getting far enough away from 2023 where the whole raison d'etre for Daggerheart came. There are plenty of good business reasons for this, but from a marketing perspective, this was a failure. This was a failure of imagination. This was not gaming out the possibilities, because what would make a bigger splash in the tabletop world than Critical Role saying, for this campaign, we're switching over to our new system, Daggerheart. We hope you come join us, learn about this system, and we hope you really enjoy it as an alternative for all of you who want to try something different. They would never say, for those of you who want to get away from D&D, but to try something different. I think they must have had time pressure coming from some direction on this that forced them to do this, because otherwise what they did doesn't make any like logical sense from like that macro perspective I'm talking about. Because, okay, let's say, Brennan Lee Mulligan's running a 13-person West Marches game, right? Well, okay, maybe if you knew you were going to be running Daggerheart on it, don't do that.
Sure.
Or have a season 3.5, or make season 4 shorter, smaller, to really like show off Daggerheart. And I know they've done some stuff with Daggerheart, but nothing that's been like their marquee.
I mean, it's worth keeping in mind that Daggerheart being as freshly released as it is, we're in version 1 territory. Mm-hmm. It's possible that they had the conversation and what they decided was, let's wait to, really like elevate Daggerheart as a system until we've got a lot of meat on those bones.
And that's fair.
Right now, it's just the core rules, right? Like, they don't have any modules or anything.
Yeah. I know, like, for example, like, Inver and I were talking a couple of weeks ago, and she's already started working on some subclasses and some interesting stuff to help, like, do our part to fill that out a little bit. So that's interesting. So, yeah, like, maybe that's part of it. Because I think one of the comments I saw somewhere was like, well, they got 13 people in there. They're literally going to run out of interesting subclasses to play, or there's going to be tons of overlap.
There's a little bit of that. And I also think, at least in our community, we've noticed some hesitation toward moving to a new system. And part of that is Daggerheart is so new that a lot of people are like, oh, well, gosh, I don't know anything about it. I don't know if I can learn enough about it to be able to pick it up and play it. And it's like, well, don't worry about all that. Like, we can take care of that for you. And they're like, oh, well, I don't know. Like, I'd be more comfortable if I'd had more time with it first.
Mm-hmm. But again, the thing is, the Critical Role crew, they could be the ones that could be evangelizing it and like showing people how easy it is by using it on Critical Role Season 4.
Except you and I both know that Matthew Mercer and even Brennan Lee Mulligan play a little fast and loose with whatever rule set they're currently under.
Yeah. And I want to make really clear, like, how I'm talking about this, like, because I also play very fast and loose with the rule set. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what system you're using, especially for an actual / narrative play, because everybody's there just to have fun. And the rules are more of a loose framework to organize the fun than anything else. I'm talking about it strictly from like somebody launching a product and having a they own their media. They own this is not paid media for them. They're not paying people to advertise Daggerheart. They are literally doing it, and they're just choosing not to. And it just baffles me. It baffles me because, and I respect the truth and logic of the argument that like, well, D&D is the most popular system, so it makes sense for them to use it. That totally makes sense. But at the same time, like, they could also control the conditions under which they put out Daggerheart and put out the next season of Critical Role. So to a certain extent, I don't buy that as a reason, because they controlled all the variables there.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think that it's a D&D is more popular and that's why we're using it situation. I think the likeliest scenario is either they want to do a lot of big promotion when they've got a lot more stuff to sell, which feels high likelihood to me, or as they were discussing, hey, we're thinking about moving to a different system, Wizards was like, hey, what if we gave you some stuff and maybe a little sponsorship money and maybe a little of this and maybe a little of that down the road, and you didn't do that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 And to your, it's on version 1.2 in that Molly Russell story, she brings up a really good point. It's like, hey, like 5e has like more than 300 monsters. Daggerheart has 30. So like fair. But I just go back to, again, like they controlled all the variables in the release of that. They could have designed the system specifically so it could support a season of Critical Role at launch.
True. They could have. That would have meant a lot more writing. Mm-hmm. And it's possible that the primary writers behind it were like, yeah, I don't have time for that right now.
The other thing about this that makes me laugh is a couple months ago, it's like, oh, Darrington Press, they it's such a coup. They got Jeremy Crawford and Chris Perkins. It's amazing. They got the chief creative and the chief game designer from D&D. Surely this is going to be such a boon to Daggerheart. Critical Role Season 4. Well, we're back to D&D.
I mean, these two things can be independently true.
It's just funny. The optics of it are really funny. And,
I will grant that.
And you have to think, too, sort of, again, to your point, that the reason that they brought Crawford and Perkins on over there is so they can develop 280 more monsters for it and add the subclasses and things like that. So again, for me, it just all keeps coming back to their timing is really wonky. Like if they weren't ready to make the next campaign after launch of Daggerheart run on Daggerheart, then Daggerheart wasn't ready to be released.
Or, hear me out.
No, that's where I'm going to cut the audio so I can just make that point and let it stand.
What if you could make a advanced playtest that people pay for?
Advanced Dungeons and Daggerheart.
That's kind of where I'm at with this. I think they released it when they felt like it was ready for public consumption, but not when it was ready to run a show off of.
They've created the fanciest ashcan version of a game in history. Hardback, a slipcover, a whole set of cards that comes with it, but it's not ready for prime time.
I mean, you can have something that's ready for the at-home games, but not ready for being on TV or Twitch or a podcast. Like that's totally reasonable, I'd say.
Yeah. No, it's like I said, at the end of the day, this doesn't matter. It's everybody who enjoys Critical Role is going to be happy with it, and I'm glad for them on that. I think honestly though, if they'd switched to Daggerheart, those people would still be excited about the story. You might have a smaller number of people who would be upset about not understanding the mechanics behind it. Because I'll say, like, when I watched the first season of Vox Machina, because as somebody who's never really listened to any Critical Role, what I enjoyed about it was seeing the things happening on screen in the adventure and being able to look at it and be like, oh, I bet in the actual play of this is because this character was fumbling rolls the whole time, and that's why they're having problems with this stuff. So it's fun to be able to understand the mechanics as you listen to the story or watch the story. But I think people are fans of Critical Role because they like Critical Role. People like Brendan Lee Mulligan, people like Matt Mercer, people like all those people, and they're gonna watch it regardless.
That's fair. Totally fair.
Yeah. But again, I think it was a weird marketing decision not to time that better. Tell us what you think about Critical Role not using Daggerheart. Tell us if you think I'm just being a nut by harping on it being a bad marketing decision. Josh has made really good points. I think he's right about a lot of them. I think I'm right about a lot of them. There's no black and white on this. And again, it doesn't matter. But we're interested to hear what you think. So drop us a line down in the comments on that. We'd really appreciate it.
It's my favorite kind of debate. The kind where whatever side wins doesn't really matter.
It's the whose line is it anyway of debates. It's all made up and the points don't matter.